Hi, I'm Natalie. Welcome back to the Profit Golf channel. Thanks again for joining me. Now, as you can tell, it's nearly Christmas, hence the Christmas jumper. So I've put together a hip mobility routine that you can follow along to in your own time, at home, at the office, wherever you are. So hip mobility has been one of the most requested topics on this channel. So exercises to improve the mobility of the hip joints, the strength of the hip joints, generally just getting the pelvis moving better. This will help us create more rotation in terms of hip turn in the golf swing. So follow along to this simple routine and see how you feel at the end. For this routine, you might want to use a mat or at least something just to protect your knees from a hard floor at home. And the first exercise we're going to work on is the pelvic tilts. So the pelvic tilt and tuck is really important to the golf swing in order to maintain posture, create some clubhead speed, and make sure you can turn correctly in the backswing and the downswing. So for this one, we're going to come down onto one knee. So I'm going to split my stance out into that rough 90-90 position, and I'm going to grab both of my hip bones where I can actually feel the bones here at the front. So the aim of the game is for me to tilt my pelvis forwards and then tuck my pelvis back in towards me. So if you imagine the pelvis as a bucket of water, the first movement we would throw the water on the floor, and the second movement we will throw the water back on ourselves. So as an exercise, I'm going to grab my hip bones here. I'm going to throw the water on the floor, so tilt my pelvis, where you can see that all of a sudden the tailbone sticks out slightly. I get a little dip here through the lower back, and this fingertip here that's on the front of the pelvis became very tight to my thigh. That's where I've tilted forwards. I'm going to hold this a couple of seconds, and then my next position is to tuck. So bring the pelvis into me, bring the water onto my body this way. That will give you a massive stretch running through the quad and the hip flexor area, possibly up into here. And if you can't feel this stretch, you're not quite in the tuck position. Hopefully, once you've got that movement, we'll hold this a couple of seconds, and then we'll flow back into that tilt position here. So tilt, hold for a second, finding this dip here in the lower back, tuck, driving this leg into extension, straighten it up, finding that stretch. Some people find the tuck position easier to picture by pushing the glute through the front of the hip. So as if this glute is driving through, but without arching from the lower back. So then we'll go into the tilt again, holding it a couple of seconds, and then driving into that tuck position, finding this stretch running through the front of the thigh, without having to manipulate the upper body. So we're not leaning and we're not excessively tucking. Let the pelvis direct your movement. So you're going to tilt, throw the water on the floor this way, tuck, holding it here, find that stretch, and then one more rep. We'll tilt this way, a little bit of a dip in the lower back, and then tuck, drive the glute through the quad on the front here, find that stretch and hold that position. So about 5 reps for this exercise, and then all we would do is we'd swap legs and then repeat the exact same motion for 5 reps, also on the other side. For the second exercise, we're going to remain down on one knee in this 90-90 position, and this is an exercise for the hip flexors moving in 3 different directions. So hip flexors are typically a tough one for people to stretch. They either butcher it and get it completely wrong, or somehow stumble on it by accident and get it correct. So this position will definitely make sure that you can feel that stretch and provide a little bit of movement around it as well. So we're going to hit that 90-90 again, exactly as we did in exercise number 1, rough 90 on the front and the back. Now, if you remember the tilt and tuck position from exercise 1, we're going to remain only in the tuck position for this exercise. That will give you that stretch running through the hip flexor, and we're trying to stay on it as best we can. So from here, I'll grab my hip bones, and you're just trying to find that natural tuck position here where you were throwing the water back onto your body, and the stretch runs through that hip flexor top of the quad area. If you're in the right place, it's impossible to not feel this. So if you can't feel this stretch, you just need to manipulate your pelvis underneath a little bit more to try and put this stretch on. So once we've found this stretch here, we're going to raise the same side arm. So my right arm will come up to the top, and extend this as much as you can, lengthening this full line. And from here, I'll very gently just push forwards a couple of inches slightly. Then I'm going to come back to my start position, push forward slightly without losing my tuck of the pelvis and trying to feel this stretch the whole time. So gently just pushing forwards, maintaining the length of this arm. The push forwards is really a couple of inches maximum. It's not enough for my knee to pass over my toe line. I'm not going all the way forwards, because if I did, I would lose this centralized position here. So we're going to do 5 reps like that. Then maintaining this tuck, so you might want to just relax in between, let it go, and then pull the pelvis underneath, bring the water on you again. We're going to raise this arm as we did. This time as you go forwards, you also just slightly reach across through the rib cage. So now the stretch comes in through this side of the ribs as well. So a gentle push forwards, reach across through the ribs. Again, very subtle, all the while holding this stretch here through the hip flexor. Coming across, we're going to do 5 in this position. So rep number 4 here, reaching across, holding this tuck, and rep number 5. Last position is to turn the opposite way. So again, just relax, let that tuck go for a second, and then we'll reposition ourselves back to where we were. So pelvis underneath, feel this stretch. This time you can pop your hands in the middle, because we're going to rotate the body this way. So I'll come towards the camera, towards you, only through the upper body. So maintaining this tuck and just rotating through my rib cage, keeping the lower body completely still. 5 of those as we work around the rotation. You're trying to maintain your ribs over your pelvis, so we don't get any disconnect of angles where we end up back or forwards and losing this position. So that tuck's the key thing here. You rotate over, last rep, all the way around. So you have 5 reps in each of the 3 positions, giving you 15, and then we would switch over and do the exact same thing on the opposite leg. Exercise number 3, again, starts in a rough 90-90 position, and that's why this mobility routine just flows really well. So this time we're going to work through the hips, include an element of side bend, so through the torso, and an element of rotation as well. So we start to mimic the movements that are required in the golf swing to make a decent set of turns, backswing and downswing. So again, I'll start rough 90-90. This time, so I've got my right leg forward, so closest to the camera. My left hand is going to come down to the floor here as flat as I possibly can. So I'm going to try and keep, if I move my foot out of the way, this hand nice and flat on the floor throughout this as best you can. If this is a struggle getting down, just use a book or something that you can raise your hand slightly higher from the ground. So a book or maybe 2 books give you a bit of a raise, and that will make this movement easier to start with. So I'm going to place my hand down on the floor. My spare hand here, my right hand, can just sit on the outside of the leg here, and all it's going to do is sweep up. So I'm going to rotate up to the ceiling, looking over my hand at the top here and creating as much of a straight line from one hand to the other as possible. Whilst I do that, I maintain this angle. So I'm trying to not push back into it, and I'm trying to not cave and lose the knee. So from here, I'll sweep up, lifting my chest and shoulder so you can see the Merry Christmas sign a little bit easier, looking at my hand, holding this a couple of seconds, and then back to the start. So for this, we're going to do 10 on each side. So we've done 2 already, so we'll sweep up here for 3, holding it a couple of seconds, and then back down. So all the way up, nice and wide, creating that length, looking up to the ceiling, back down. Whilst you're doing this, you're maintaining the flat hand position on the floor and also the flat foot position on the floor. So one thing to bear in mind with your foot is try not to claw your toes in your shoes. So your feet will grab on to get some tension. Whilst you're making this movement, try to keep your feet and your toes nice and flat. So rotating and sweeping up as best you can. If you can't get all the way up to the ceiling, just turn, make sure the body and the arm are moving as one as far as you possibly can. We'll do 2 more. All the way up, looking across. Last one. Sweeping up and looking across. So the key thing with this exercise is to make sure the arm and the body move as one. It's no use being down here and then only just moving the arm and the shoulder on its own. You have to sweep that movement all the way up, rotating through the rib cage, and that gives you that stretch in that side bend position as well. So final exercise of this little routine. This time you want a golf club to lean on. I'm just using my 7-iron. Some sort of short iron will work well for this, a 9 or an 8. And I'm going to start on both knees. So as tall as I can without overextending, but rather than sitting down, I'm going to prop myself up. I'm using my 7-iron here to lean on for balance. So if you don't have your golf club, use a wall or a chair, a table, just something to stop you falling over this side. So the aim in the game here is to create some rotation at the hips. So we'll go internal, we'll go external. So think backswing and downswing, both those movements from the hips and the pelvis. So using my golf club to lean on, I'm going to create a little bit of resistance so I can put my arm out fairly straight, drive this into the ground. What I'm going to do is lift one knee and push it back slightly, sweeping round in a circle. And then I'll basically just put this circle back to where it started. So it looks a little bit like this. I'll push back and sweep it round to the front like that. Then I'm going to lift the foot and sweep all the way back round to the start position. So driving the knee backwards slightly, keep the foot in the air, sweep it round as best you can. Lift the foot in the air, sweep that knee circularly all the way around back to the start position. The club is here to stop you falling over and leaning too far laterally. There's going to be a bit of shift in terms of body weight to help you get that motion, that's fine, but what we don't want is the excessive lean and the falling over. So we'll do 5 reps each side. So 1 rep counts as a forwards and a backwards. So lifting, driving round, place that foot down, lift the foot up, sweep all the way back round and down. So push the knee slightly behind you, driving it to the front, and then slowly lifting up, bringing all the way back down. So 2 more for this side, drive it back. Try to not catch your foot on the floor. Lift the foot up, bring it all the way down. So we don't want to be dragging the foot on either side, either the forwards or the backwards sweep. And that's where you might want to use 2 clubs. If this feels too tricky, you might want the extra bit of balance on this side as well, where you could push against the club here, and that will just give you that little bit more support to make this movement. So we'll be aiming for roughly 5 to 10 reps each side. I've only done 5 here, but that should be enough to get you feeling like you're getting some mobility at the hip joint, loosening them off and helping your hips feel a bit less stiff. So there you have the easy and quick hip mobility routine that you can follow along to at home. Hopefully these exercises should help feel like you can create a bit more mobility and rotation at the hip joint, but also help you to feel a bit less stiff through the pelvis and the hips on the whole as well. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button for a like. Subscribe if you haven't already to my channel. Be really grateful. Thank you for watching. I'm really appreciative of your time on this channel. And don't forget to have an amazing Christmas, and I'll see you in 2025.